Alright, in this video, I want to talk about your shame. Come over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and verse 34. It says, "Awake to righteousness, and sin not. For some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame." Now, this is where Paul is talking about the dead raising to life. And he's talking about if Jesus doesn't raise from the dead, then what do we actually have hope for? We might as well just go live like the world, right? But he's saying, no, Jesus rose from the dead. Therefore, we are not in our sins, and we won't die in our sins. Jesus got the victory. And while saying this, he throws out a little rebuke here, telling these Corinthians, this is 1 Corinthians 15 here, saying, awake, right? Come to life, to righteousness, and sin not, like he talked about in Romans. In Romans chapter 5 and 6, he talks about, you're not under the law, you're under grace. You think that means you should go sin? He says, no. Just because you're saved doesn't mean you should go live in sin. As he says, should we sin that grace may abound? He's like, no. Even though grace would abound, don't do that. This is why. There's some that have not the knowledge of God. And he speaks this to our shame because it's our fault as Christians that they don't. Why? Because of one of these two reasons. These are the two main ones. Either you're lukewarm and you're just kind of going through the motions, like whatever, I'm Christian, you go to church every week, you do your thing, but there's no real fire to you. But you're not ice cold either, right? You're lukewarm. You're just a whatever, bump on the log, and that doesn't inspire anybody else to become Christian, right? They look at you and they're like, oh, that's Christianity? I'm good, thanks. And the second reason is because people think, well, I'm saved, I can just live like the world, right? Just like he talked about in chapter 5, he said, hey, why aren't you actually kicking this fornicator who was sleeping with his father's wife out of the church? He's like, you're like glorying in it. Why would they glory in it? Because they know that, hey, we're saved no matter what, and where sin abounds, grace abounds. But he's saying, no, you're being leavened. You got to be a new lump of bread and purge out the old leaven. Be new, right? As he's saying again here, awake to righteousness and sin not. He's encouraging them not to sin, but not so that they would be saved, but because there's some that don't have the knowledge of God. Even among the Christians, there's a lot of people who aren't really actually saved. They never truly believe. They don't really see God. They just kind of grew up with it, or it's part of their community, or part of their politics, part of their business, right? It has nothing to actually do with truly believing. And that's because a lot of the Christians around are lukewarm and worldly. Right? They got their own sins and they just kind of enable each other. And Paul's just like, wake up! Straighten things out. Be a light to the world, the salt of the earth, a pillar of truth holding forth the word of life, a living sacrifice, which is your reasonable and acceptable service. What did God do for you? And look at what you're doing for him and what you're doing for others. People need to know God. You might be the only thing that's actually going to get them to get to know God. They see how you know God and how you love God and what He's done through you and with you. That's what inspires people. Like, hey, God's real. There's power with God. He can change you. He will change you. And it gets them curious. Gets them asking questions. Gets them to listen. Submit yourself unto God so you can be molded into the image and likeness of Jesus. So that people can see God and know God and come to God. So that being said, thanks for watching. Take the bag off your head. Do the right thing.
So that fella couldn't join the church. He couldn't join the church. He couldn't get baptized. He couldn't get baptized. He woke up with God. He woke up with the devil. Are you saved? Amen. So that fella didn't take the sacraments. Didn't take the sacraments. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't tithe. Didn't tithe. He went to heaven. He went to hell. You saved? Didn't keep the law. He didn't keep the law. He broke the commandments. He broke the commandments. He didn't keep the golden rule. He didn't keep the golden rule. He woke up in glory. He woke up in the pit. Are you saved? You're saved. If you're not saved, you're over here or you're over here. You sure ain't in the middle. He said, Lord, remember me, thou comest thy kingdom. And Jesus turned to him and said, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be saved. Just like that. You have been saved? If you ever saved, you were saved like that.